This is going to sound really meta as we use that word. How many of you have found yourselves, whether it be working in a job or working on a project, whatever the case may be, or in a career field, and there's this voice in your ear or in your head, or whispering in your ear or in your head telling you that this is not your final chapter? Meaning you're meant for something else, you're meant to do something else. And now you're starting to ask yourself, well, if that's the case, what does that look like? And the more terrifying reality is that once you've accepted, or maybe even you've told yourself, yes, I am ready for that, you now deal with this horror of telling yourself, I have been doing a certain thing for so long. Do I really want to start over? I want to share with you something. You're not starting over. In theory, you're never really starting over because no one can erase all of the years of experience that you have in this one capacity. What's happening is that you're evolving in a different direction. And that evolution, it may take some growing pains, but it's only meant to build on that which you have already or to supplement or augment what you have already. Trust me, I know what it's like. It's terrifying. Let me share with you how it happened for me. In the spring of 1998, I made a life-altering decision. I decided to resign my commission as a naval officer and go to law school to become a lawyer. Was it scary? Yes, it was. And for those of you who are like, why was that scary? I said, because for me, I thought the Navy was my final destination. I mean, if you look at my history in terms of the things I'd done, I had done all these different things to put myself in a position to be able to be an officer in the military. I had finally achieved that. And so I didn't think that there would be any way for anything to happen that would disrupt that. And for me, being in the Navy, especially when I got stationed in Camp Lejeune, was crucial because it had everything I wanted. It had the systems, it had the predictability, it had the consistency. I had built an infrastructure of friends who supported me. I had all of the safety nets that were around me that I believed would allow me the ability to both flourish and thrive in this particular environment. And in my mind, I had told myself, I'm about to throw that all away. Listen to how I phrase that. Not, I'm getting ready to go into this exciting new opportunity. I viewed this through the lens of me throwing all of this away. I had looked and had convinced myself that this was all the things I had been aspiring to get. I now had it. And so now I am sitting here telling myself, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now that I have no longer have these things? That's the lens I was looking at. And that was the stressful situation I found myself in when I made the decision that I was ready to turn my chapter of my life and take this new chapter in this direction. There's a phrase that a lot of people use. It's called confirmation bias. It's a nice term, and for those of you, go ahead and Google it and so forth. I'm going to give a really rough thing. It's when we basically allow certain situations to occur to confirm a bias that we have. So, for instance, if you apply for a job and you didn't get hired, you say, well, that's just confirmation I wasn't supposed to get that job. Not necessarily. It might have been the person who they picked was somebody they had already picked. So you just unfortunately got there a little late. That doesn't mean you weren't meant to have that job. It just means you just didn't get the job. So what ends up happening is that we often will use various situations to confirm or validate a feeling we may have, even when it's negative. I can tell you for me, it was tough because even as I was going through the process of applying to law school, I had kept telling myself, I kept putting these bars up higher and higher, telling myself this was confirmation why I shouldn't go. So the first one was, well, I'm not going to get into law school, so I don't have to worry about it. Then I got into law school. Then all of a sudden, well, there was a particular law school that I wanted to get into, and I didn't think I was going to get into it, and then I got into it. But then I said, well, there's a dream school. There's a dream school I definitely want to get into, Florida State University College of Law. If I don't get in there, then boom, I don't need to go. Now, which is silly when you stop and you think about it. I've already been admitted to law school. I have already been admitted to more than one law school. But I'm at each point, I am looking for an excuse to basically pass up on this opportunity. Because in my mind, even though this was a dream opportunity, I had been telling myself there's no way I have the ability to achieve this dream. So I need to look for confirmation, which is dumb as a bag of rocks. Because in this particular instance, like I said, I took the law school admissions test. I got admitted into law school. And then all of a sudden, I'm looking at the law school going, okay, maybe they didn't know what they were doing when they admitted me. So let me try this law school. Then that law school, which is what I wanted to go to as well, let me in. Well, maybe they didn't really know what they wanted to go to, but this school is an upper, not saying the other two weren't great quality schools, but this school was one of the top two. Florida State at the time had one of like the top two bar passage rates of the 10 law schools in the state of Florida at the time. Nationally and internationally recognized law school. And I'm thinking, there's no way I'm getting into this school. Then all of a sudden I get, the next thing I know, I get a call telling me they're going to put me on a waiting list. I am telling myself, there's no way I'm getting off this waiting list. No way. Say, holla at you, boy. Get it, 2 fingers in the air. And I can still remember getting the call where they called me on the phone and said, hello, Mr. Reeves. Hi, my name is such and such from Florida State University. Keep in mind, this was like pre-caller ID on your phone, so I didn't even know who this was. And I'm like, yeah? I don't know if you know, we spoke a couple of weeks ago, told you there was a waiting list. I said, yeah. And I'm thinking she's calling me to tell me, yeah, unfortunately, we're closed off, so we want you to try again next year. Again, I'm looking for the off-ramp. This is good. And she's like, well, I'm just here to tell you that we had a student who has declined to go to Florida State. There's an opening, and we'd like for you to come. Are you still interested? I said yes because I was like, well, this is my dream school. This is it. But when I said yes and I hung up the phone, it became real. Because keep in mind, nobody forced me to get out the Navy. Nobody told me you have to take this. Nobody told me that you have to resign your commission. I did not think this was a possibility because in my mind, kind of the imposter syndrome, I'm thinking, I'm not smart enough to get to law school. What the hell am I do this for? Until all of a sudden, oh crap. It wasn't like I thought I was dumb, but I had rationalized that being in the Navy was the end all and be all for me. There's no way there's a better opportunity for me out there. None. And in my mind, I kind of quasi told myself the better thing was going to law school or medical school or whatever school, but law school was what I was focusing on until it was. At this point, I'd gotten 3 shots at me. Law school, a desirable law school, and then the dream school. All 3 said, come on down. So now at this point, I'm now faced with this terrifying reality that there is an opportunity in front of me that I have worked hard to leverage. So what you going to do now? What I'm going to do now turned into this very surreal moment of transitioning. It's amazing when we see shows where everybody goes through these big life-altering situations and they're all climatic with the soundtrack and the orchestra. Oh, I'm going to do this. For me, mine was no fanfare. It was really just a matter of me getting on the phone, calling the detailer for the Navy, the person who's responsible for assigning you your locations, and telling him simply, I've made the decision, I'm going to resign my commission effective this date, and then I'm going to leave to go to Florida State, go to law school. Okay, deuces. And the thing that was most moving for me was that every day represented a last day. Meaning, as silly as it may seem, because I was leaving in August, and even though I was getting ready to get to the duty station to go someplace else, it wasn't a matter of going someplace else. Every day represented the last day I would be in the military. Not saying I couldn't have came back in, but what it really signified to me is that every day would be the last day. So everything that happened felt like that. So when the moving crew came to move my stuff out of the house I was renting, it would be the last time I would have a moving company move the stuff out of my house on a military situation. I stayed with my then girlfriend, my wife, then girlfriend. And so every day at her place was a reminder that when I got up in the morning and I went to base to do work, I would no longer be doing so for a long period of time. And I'm going to tell you, that week with her was even more chilling for me because I had been spending the 3 years before coming from my own house. Now I was coming from somebody else's place, and it just didn't feel right, but it was what it was. And then, of course, there was those magical 2 days before, because she and her aunt helped repack my car because it was packed to the nines. So that was it. And so I had all the stuff, all my clothes were going to come with me. But I can still remember going on base, saying goodbye to everybody in my unit, turning in my military ID, removing my military decal off my car, driving off the base, knowing that once I drove off the base, I would no longer be driving on the base again. And so the next day, I then got in the car, gave my wife a hug, gave my wife a kiss, and proceeded to drive from Jacksonville, North Carolina, 10 hours to Tallahassee, Florida. And again, nothing cinematic. I literally just got on the car, and just drove completely to a place that was completely unknown. I had lived in Tallahassee for a year, so it wasn't like I wasn't familiar with the city, but I'm now going back under a wholly different set of circumstances. I'm no longer an officer in the military. I'm no longer gainfully employed. And I no longer know definitively if this is what was meant for me to do. But here's the most crucial part. A lot of times what happens is that we often, when we make these life altering change, we usually have this, what I call this grace period, when we start asking ourselves the questions, did we make the right decision? You've got to keep in mind, I had to drive 10 hours. And during that 10 hours, I had 10 hours worth of time to evaluate whether the decision I just made was the right one. And so I'm going through every scenario in my head. I'm asking myself, was I dumb to not go to my next duty station? Was I dumb for getting out of the military? What am I going to do if I don't get out of the first semester of law school? What if I wash out after the first year? What is my plans going to be from the future then? In my mind, I have literally played out every worst case scenario. Now, here's the other part about this, because a lot of times when you make a life change, you're usually making a change to the unknown. So it's easier to envision the worst case scenarios with the unknown because you probably have lived the worst. So those are the easiest to anticipate. Not once did I cross my mind of thinking about the best case scenario. I didn't think about, well, what are you going to do if you graduate, when you graduate? What are you going to do when you pass the bar? What types of lawyer you want to do? Where do you want to practice law? Do you want to stay in Florida? None of those things crossed my mind. Because at this particular point, there was one thing I knew. I knew the military. I had served 3 years as an officer. I knew the job that I had been hired for. My job was related to the master's degree I had attained. I knew my pathway in terms of what was going to happen after that next duty station and then the next one. I knew what that pathway looked like. The uncertainty was this path of not knowing this. I didn't know what was going to be that first class. I didn't know what my first grades were going to look like. I didn't know what my first semester was going to look like. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do this. I didn't know if this was what my dream was going to look like. So what happened was I started looking for confirmation that I made the wrong decision. And that's one of the really trickier things to run across. You start running into these things where you start saying to yourself, oh crap, I'm looking for things to validate or confirm that I should not have done this. A lot of things I should have done. Maybe this is not one of those things. And so what happens is that for those of us who made life altering changes, we sometimes, instead of taking the time to look at all the things that could go right, we focus on the things that we could go wrong. As one person once told me, if you're looking for something to go wrong, you might try to go out of your way to make it happen. In my mind, I didn't try, but I was ready for it, but I didn't know what the hell I would do. So I then started thinking in my mind, is there a way to go back in the Navy if this doesn't work out? How do I play this out? So here we go. As I'm rolling towards Tallahassee, I get to Tallahassee, something special happened. So now here I am, Florida State. And I'm starting to realize as I pull up to Florida State University and I pull up to the College of Law, a light came on. I said, this is where I bet on me. Whether I want to believe it or not, it's not about the school. It's not about the military. It's about betting on me. And what does that mean? Well, I can still remember when I got there, one of the things I had to do is I'd already signed up for financial aid, so I knew that I had already had that taken care of. What I didn't realize is that the financial aid that I had only covered you. It did not cover everything. And so I'm freaking out. So what do you think I'm doing? I'm telling myself, well, I ain't got enough money to pay for law school. I don't know what I can do. I can't work over here at Krispy Kreme or the grocery store to pay. So I'm freaking out. But I still remember when I went into financial aid and I'm talking to the lady. She's trying to help me work this out. And she's trying to research if there's any other financial opportunities, whether it be scholarships or grants that she can look for me. But then she noticed something. She was like, you came from North Carolina? She was like, yeah. Are you from North Carolina? I was like, no. She said, where are you domiciled? I mean, excuse me, where's your primary place of residence? Because she looked on there and she said, you're from Arkansas. I said, yeah. I said, I haven't claimed Arkansas in years. And so it's funny because she said, go back to your military paperwork and see where you're domiciled. And so I went back, and of course, when I came down in the car and all my stuff packed, I brought any necessary paperwork. I didn't know if I was going to need it, but I brought it. And so I brought it over to the lady, and she looked up and she saw where I was indicated I was a resident in North Carolina for when I was stationed there, but I was domiciled in Florida. She said, How did you manage to pull that off? I said, well, I went to school here and I worked for the state of Florida for 3 years here while I was in graduate school. She said, so you never changed your domicile? I said, no. As a matter of fact, I was told that it was probably in your best interest, stick to your state as opposed to trying to domicile every time you move. As such, guess what happened? They had to recalculate how much I had to pay for law school to treat me as an in-state student as opposed to an out-of-state student. So now I was in this great position where now, not only did I have enough money to cover school, but I was also a portion of that money would be allocated to me as a stipend, even though I had to pay it back, as a stipend to take care of living expenses because I was living on campus. And so now in the graduate housing, and so now I could take care of that money to take care of things like getting groceries and getting other things turned on, cell phones, things of that nature. And now I realized, you know what? I was meant to be here, and it made my brain turn off this mindset of waiting for this shoe to drop. Because what happened was after that, no shoe ever dropped. And I realized with that, I was meant to be there. The most important thing about that entire experience was that I started to realize after that, and I had a chance to sit down and take stock, that as opposed to spending all of my time dwelling on, oh my God, I left the military, I left the military, I left the military, that at that moment I stopped and said, I'm a law student. And once I leaned into listening to what that meant, that told me that I wasn't starting over. I was evolving to a new chapter of my life. It's okay. I had a chapter of my life where I was a grad student. I had a chapter of my life where I worked in the state. I had a chapter of my life where I was a young officer. Now this chapter is where I'm a law student. Let's see where this takes me. And fortunately for me, it took me to a lot of great places while I was in law school and made a lot of great friends who are still friends to me to this day. And so what I realized is that sometimes what happens when and it doesn't happen. I'm not trying to tell you that this is not a we are the world story. It's that moment that you need to stop and ask yourself when you hear that voice is telling you that you're meant for something more and that this is not your final destination. Take stock. Because the reality is you have many more skill sets and abilities that you haven't given yourself credit for. And sometimes hearing that voice is your body's way of telling you that we want to use all of the skills that you have available to you. Now, a lot of times the opportunities may not readily present themselves. You may have to do like I did and create one for yourself. And it can be something so outside of the norm of what you thought, but it might be the thing that works best for you. Whether it be deciding, you know what, I've worked in corporate America, I'm going to open my own catering company. I've done this, I'm going to open my own art gallery. I've done this, I'm going to open my own coffee shop. And none of those things are wrong. And don't let anybody try to tell you that you're wrong because you're looking to transition to a different thing. If you believe and you feel you're meant for something more, you're halfway there. Now, let's just work on more.